The rain came down in torrents, an unrelenting downpour that drummed against the roofs and flooded the narrow pathways of the village. The air was thick with moisture, and the river that cut through the edge of the village roared louder than ever, swollen by the storm. Amma awoke to the sound of water pouring through her open window. She rushed to close it, her bare feet slipping on the wet floor as the wind howled outside. As she latched the shutters, her ears caught the sound of voices murmuring in the dark. Two figures stood at the far corner of the compound, their dark robes soaked by the rain. Amma squinted through the gloom, her breath catching in her throat as she heard them speak. Get rid of him quickly. But before we dive deeper into this tale, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter. The river will take him and no one will ever know, one of the men said, his voice rough and urgent. The other nodded. He's barely conscious now. It won't take much. Let's finish this before dawn. Amma's heart pounded. She could barely make out a third figure slumped between the two men, his body limp and unmoving. Without thinking, she ducked back inside, her mind racing. She had no idea who the men were or why they were trying to dispose of the stranger, but she knew she couldn't let them carry out their plan. Amma hurried to her cousin Chijioki's room, waking him with a whisper. Get up, there's no time to explain. We need to help someone, now. Chijioki blinked at her, confused and groggy, but Amma's urgency shook him awake. Amma, what's happening? There's a man by the river and he's in danger. Please, Chijioki, I need your help. Despite his hesitation, Chijioke nodded. Moments later, the two of them crept out into the rain, the cold drops stinging their skin. They followed the sound of the river's roar, moving as quietly as they could. The two men were nowhere to be seen, but the slumped figure lay motionless near the water's edge. With a silent nod, they moved toward him, each step treacherous on the muddy ground. Together, they managed to lift the man whose body was as cold as the rain pouring down on them. It took all their strength to drag him back to the village and to the home of the local healer, whose wisdom was well known and respected. The healer, a stern woman with piercing eyes, examined the unconscious stranger carefully, her hands moving with practiced precision. He's been poisoned, she finally said, her voice grim. A rare substance that causes madness if not treated soon. You must take him to a sanctuary for the mentally afflicted. Amma looked down at the stranger, whose face was twisted in agony even in unconsciousness. I'll take care of him, she said firmly, even as Chijioki and the healer exchanged worried glances. Word of Amma's decision spread quickly through the village, like the morning mist rising from the wet earth. She knew the whispers had started, the disapproving glances, the hushed conversations, but she felt an unexplainable pull to help the stranger. She couldn't quite articulate it, but it was as if a thread, invisible and unbreakable, tied her fate to his. Her betrothed, Emeka, was among the first to express his concern. He confronted her near the well where she had gone to fetch water, his face drawn with worry and frustration. Amma, why are you involving yourself in this? This man, whoever he is, he's dangerous. The healer herself said he could be mad. Amma's grip on the water pot tightened. She had expected this. Emeka, I feel something. I can't turn my back on him. Feel something? Emeka's voice rose, his patience wearing thin. And what of us, Amma? What of our future? This isn't your burden to bear. The tension between them was palpable. Amma could see the love in Emeka's eyes, but it was mixed with a fear she had never seen before. I need to do this, she said softly, resolutely. If you love me, you'll trust me. For a moment, Emeka's face softened, but the anger quickly returned. I can't support this madness. You must choose, him or me. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air, a cloud that refused to disperse. Amma returned home, her heart heavier than ever. She took to caring for the stranger with an intensity that worried her family. She fed him, bathed his wounds, and spoke to him even when he could not respond. She learned that the poison's effects were slow, seeping into the mind like roots into soil, warping reality into shadows. One night, exhausted from her vigil, Amma fell asleep beside the stranger's cot and dreamt. In her dream, he was no longer a ragged, broken man, but a chief dressed in fine robes, his presence commanding and dignified. He looked at her with knowing eyes, and she felt a wave of calm wash over her, as if he understood her deeper than anyone ever had. Amma awoke with a start, the dream lingering like a sweet fragrance in her mind. She stared at the stranger's face, now peaceful in slumber, and wondered, could he be more than he appeared? She had to know, even if it meant defying Emika and the entire village. Amma could feel the weight of Emika's ultimatum pressing down on her like a heavy stone. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, and their encounters became increasingly strained. Each day, as she tended to the stranger, she could see Emeka watching from a distance, his expression hardening with every passing moment. The village, too, had become a place of silent judgment. Women who once greeted her with warm smiles now turned their heads, whispering behind their hands. Ama knew what they were saying, that she had been bewitched, that her mind was lost to madness just like the stranger's. She could feel her world shrinking, the space around her closing in. Still, she persisted, tending to the man whose face she had come to know so well, searching for any sign that he might awaken and reveal the truth of who he was. Emika's patience finally snapped one evening. He cornered her by the old baobab tree, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "I've had enough, Amma. This ends now." Amma looked at him, her eyes steady. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." His voice trembled with anger. "This man, this stranger, you've let him come between us. You've let him destroy everything we've built. I'm trying to save a life, Emika. Can't you see that?" "Save a life?" Emika laughed bitterly. "Or lose everything else in the process? The elders have spoken. They want him gone. And if you don't do it, I will." Amma's heart raced. She knew Emika well enough to understand that this was no idle threat. "You'd hurt him? You'd do that to me?" "I'd do it for you," Emika shot back. "To save you from this madness. You have until tomorrow. Either you get rid of him or I will. And after that, there's nothing left between us." Amma stood frozen as Emeka walked away, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. She felt as if the ground beneath her was giving way, her heart torn between the man she loved and the strange bond she felt with the madman. She knew what the village expected of her, what Emika demanded. But that night, as she sat beside the stranger's cot, her resolve began to harden. She would not take his life. She could not. The dream had been too vivid, too real. And as much as she loved Emeka, something inside her whispered that this stranger, whoever he was, held a key to a future she could not yet see. Amma could barely sleep that night. She drifted in and out of restless dreams, her mind a whirlpool of emotions and fears. When sleep finally came, it brought with it another vision. She found herself standing in a grand hall filled with people dressed in rich, flowing robes. The stranger stood at the center, no longer disheveled and broken, but proud and whole, his eyes gleaming with wisdom. He turned to her and spoke, his voice deep and resonant. "Do not fear the path that has been laid before you, Amma. The river's current does not flow in vain." She awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was quiet except for the steady breathing of the man beside her. She stared at him, the words of the dream echoing in her mind. She knew now what she had to do. She would not allow fear or Emika's anger to dictate her choices. The next morning, Amma went to Emeka. She found him by the riverbank, his face set in a grim expression as he gazed out over the rushing water. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice steady. Emeka turned to her, a flicker of hope in his eyes that quickly faded as he saw her resolve. "And I won't do it," she said. "I won't harm him." Emika's face darkened. "Then you've chosen him over me." "I've chosen to follow my heart," she replied. "I'm sorry, Emeka. I love you, but I can't ignore what I feel. This isn't just about him. It's about me and what I believe is right." For a moment, Emeka looked at her with a mixture of sorrow and rage. Then he nodded slowly. "You've made your choice, Amma, and now you'll live with the consequences." Amma watched him walk away, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. She knew she had lost something precious, but she also felt a new sense of freedom, a lightness that came from standing firm in her truth. She returned to the stranger, her heart steady and clear. She would care for him, no matter what the village said, no matter what the cost. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she looked at the man she had saved, lying peacefully beneath the thin blanket. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, not with fear or confusion, but with a quiet hope, what his presence in her life truly meant, and what path it might lead her down. Days turned into weeks, and despite the mounting pressure from the village and the absence of Emika's once comforting presence, Amma found solace in her decision. She continued to care for the stranger, whose condition remained unchanged, his eyes still shut to the world. Yet every day she spent beside him, she felt an inexplicable closeness, a deepening connection that words could not explain. One morning, as Amma was drawing water from the well, she felt a sudden wave of dizziness. She leaned against the stone wall, her vision blurring. A neighbor passing by stopped to offer help, concern etched on her face. "Amma, are you all right?" Amma nodded, but inside she felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation. Something was different. Days passed, and the feeling grew stronger until it became undeniable. She sought out the healer who had treated the stranger, and after a thorough examination, the healer's expression turned grave. "Amma," she said softly, "you are with child." Amma's world tilted. She stared at the healer, her breath caught in her throat. "That's not possible. I've been with no one but—" The words caught in her mouth as realization dawned on her. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly. The healer watched her carefully, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and concern. "Amma, there are forces at play here that we do not understand. This child, it may not be an ordinary one." News of Amma's pregnancy spread through the village like wildfire, igniting outrage and scandal. The whispers grew louder. She could hear them even when she walked by. She was accused of carrying a demon's child, of being cursed or possessed. The elders met to discuss her fate, and it wasn't long before Emeka, filled with fury and humiliation, sought the counsel of a traditional priest. The priest, an old man with eyes clouded by age but clear with wisdom, listened patiently to Emeka's request. "I want her and that child cursed," Emeka spat, his face twisted with rage. "They've ruined everything." The priest nodded slowly and prepared to consult the spirits. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice grave. "The child within Amma is not to be harmed. It carries a powerful destiny, one that even the spirits dare not interfere with. You must abandon this path of vengeance or face ruin yourself." Emeka left the priest's hut, his mind reeling with anger and confusion. He could not fathom a world where this stranger and his unborn child could hold such power, and his heart hardened further against Amma. Despite the priest's warning, Emeka's anger only deepened. His heart, once filled with love for Amma, now burned with a bitter resentment. He sought out a sorcerer known for his dealings in dark magic, a man whose price was high and whose methods were feared. Emeka wanted to see Amma suffer, to see the stranger she had chosen over him destroyed. The sorcerer agreed, his voice a low rasp as he chanted over a fire, casting bones and mixing potions that reeked of death and decay. He sent a curse into the wind, aimed directly at Amma and her unborn child. But as the days passed, something strange began to happen. The curse did not strike Amma. Instead, its effects began to reflect back onto Emeka himself. He started to experience terrible nightmares, visions of drowning in a river, and hearing voices whispering his name from the shadows. Desperate, he returned to the sorcerer, demanding an explanation. The sorcerer looked at him with narrowed eyes, sensing something he hadn't before. "There are forces more powerful than my own at work here," he said slowly. "This curse has rebounded because it was not meant to be. The child you sought to harm is protected by something far beyond my reach or yours." Fear crept into Emeka's heart. He had thought himself strong enough to command fate, to bend the spirits to his will, but now he saw the darkness creeping toward him. His nights were filled with terror, and his days were haunted by whispers that only he could hear. Meanwhile, Amma, oblivious to the sorcery around her, continued to care for the stranger. She could feel a new strength within her, a sense of purpose that grew each day. Though the village still treated her with suspicion and disdain, she no longer cared. She had accepted her fate and the mystery of the life growing within her. One night, as she sat beside the stranger, she thought she saw his lips move, a faint murmur escaping them. She leaned closer, holding her breath, and heard him whisper a single word, "Amma." Her heart skipped a beat. It was the first sign of consciousness he had shown since she rescued him. She touched his hand, feeling the warmth beneath her fingers. "I'm here," she whispered back, "and I will not leave you no matter what comes." She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing with certainty. The threads of her life were woven together with his, and whatever destiny awaited them, they would face it together. As the weeks passed, the stranger's condition slowly began to change. He would murmur in his sleep, his limbs occasionally twitching as if caught in a dream. Amma felt the stirrings of hope in her chest. Perhaps he was waking up, perhaps soon he would be able to tell her who he was, and why their paths had crossed in such a fateful way. Meanwhile, a new tension gripped the nearby kingdom. News spread like wildfire that the eldest son of the Igwe, the heir apparent to the throne, had vanished without a trace on the eve of his coronation. The disappearance had plunged the kingdom into chaos, igniting whispers of treachery, foul play, and a power struggle among the royal family. Rumors began to circulate in Amma's village that the madman she had rescued could be the missing prince. It seemed far-fetched, a tale spun by the tongues of those seeking drama in their otherwise quiet lives, but the rumors gained traction. People started recalling the strange signs. The man's refined features beneath the grime, his body bearing scars that looked like the markings of battle, and the strange reverence that seemed to emanate from him even in his unconscious state. The village elders, who had once called for the stranger to be cast out, now saw an opportunity. If the man was indeed the lost prince, his recovery could bring favor to their village. They convened in secret, their voices low and tense as they debated the possibility. If he is the prince, one elder argued, and we have kept him safe, then our village will be remembered. We must find out for certain. But if he is just a madman, another elder countered, and we pursue this claim, we risk bringing the wrath of the kingdom upon us for meddling in royal affairs. The decision was made to send a messenger to the palace, discreetly hinting that a man matching the prince's description had been found. Amma, unaware of this development, continued her vigil by the stranger's side, the stirrings of life within her reminding her daily of the mysteries that surrounded them both. She noticed a change in the villagers' attitudes toward her, less disdainful and more curious, even cautious. The whispers had changed tone. They no longer spoke of curses, but of destiny, of a possible future where their village played a significant role in the affairs of the kingdom. One evening, as Amma was preparing a warm cloth to lay on the stranger's forehead, a group of elders approached her hut. The oldest among them, his voice thick with authority, spoke first. "Amma, we believe this man you've been caring for may not be who we thought he was. There is a possibility he could be of royal blood." Amma looked at them, her heart pounding. "And what does that mean?" "It means," the elder continued, "that your decision to save him may have been more than just an act of kindness. It could change all our lives." Amma listened as the elders laid out their plan. If the stranger was indeed the missing prince, they needed to prove his identity. They would send for a royal emissary to come and confirm his lineage. Until then, Amma was instructed to keep a close watch over him, ensuring his safety. They were no longer speaking to her as an outcast, but with a newfound respect, recognizing her actions might have saved a royal life. But Amma was wary. She knew how quickly favor could turn to scorn, how easily respect could become resentment. She also knew that no matter what, her fate, and the strangers, were now inextricably linked. "I will continue to care for him," she said, her voice steady. "But I ask that you let me decide what is best for him should he awaken. He has been through much, and his choices should be his own." The elders exchanged glances but nodded. "Very well, Amma. We await the truth, whatever it may be." As they left, Amma felt a mix of fear and determination. She realized that her choices were no longer just her own. They would affect the entire village. She would need to be careful and wise in the days to come. The next morning, she made her way to the riverbank, seeking a moment of clarity away from the watchful eyes of the villagers. She felt the weight of the past few months, the loss of her relationship with Amika, the suspicion of her community, the mystery of the man she had saved, pressing down on her shoulders. But beneath that weight was a current of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Amika found her there, standing by the water's edge, her face turned to the rising sun. His face was worn with fatigue, his eyes sunken with the torment of sleepless nights. Yet, there was still a flicker of the man she had once loved, buried beneath the bitterness. "You've changed, Amma," he said quietly, his voice softer than it had been in weeks. "I have," she replied, turning to face him. "I've had to. And so have you." For a moment, they stood in silence, the river rushing beside them. "I came to say I'm sorry," Emeka finally said. "I let my anger consume me, and I've done things I regret. But I need to know, is this truly what you want?" Amma looked at him, her eyes filled with both sadness and a kind of peace. "Yes, it is. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I can't go back to the way things were. I must see this through, whatever it means." Amika nodded, his shoulders slumping as if a great weight had been lifted. "Then I wish you well, Amma. I hope I hope you find what you're looking for." As he walked away, Amma felt a small, quiet ache in her heart, a mourning for what might have been. But she also felt a surge of courage. She returned to her hut with a sense of resolve. She had chosen her path, and she would follow it wherever it led. And if the stranger were truly who they suspected he was, her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Days turned into a tense waiting game as the village awaited the arrival of the royal emissary. Amma stayed close to the stranger, watching over him with unwavering dedication. She was no longer certain of what to hope for, whether his waking would confirm the rumors of his royal lineage or something else entirely. What she did know was that this man who had come to mean so much to her was finally beginning to stir. On the morning the emissary was expected, Amma noticed a shift in the stranger's breathing. It was deeper, more rhythmic, as if he were moving closer to consciousness. She whispered his name, the only word he had ever spoken to her, but his eyes remained closed. Still, she held his hand, willing him to wake, to tell her the truth that had eluded them all. Meanwhile, Emeka had not remained idle. Despite his parting words to Amma, he had been brooding, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Though he had admitted his regrets, a part of him still burned with unresolved anger. The idea of losing Amma to this stranger, madman or prince, was something he could not fully accept. That afternoon, as the villagers gathered in anticipation, Emeka approached Amma's hut, his steps deliberate. Inside, he found her sitting by the stranger's side, her hand resting lightly on his. The sight twisted his heart, and before he could control himself, his voice rang out sharply. "Amma, this is enough!" he shouted, his face flushed with fury. "You have allowed this madness to go on for too long. I cannot stand by and watch any longer." Amma turned to face him, her expression calm but resolute. "What would you have me do, Emeka? Deny what is in my heart? Turn my back on what I believe to be true?" Emeka stepped closer, his hands trembling. "I would have you see reason. This man, whoever he has torn us apart. And for what? Some foolish hope? Some dream?" "Maybe it is a foolish hope," Amma replied quietly. "But it is mine, and I will not abandon it now." Emeka's anger boiled over. "Then you leave me no choice." In a swift motion, he drew a knife from his side, the blade glinting in the low light. "If he truly is who they say, then let him wake now and stop me." Amma's breath caught in her throat, but she did not back away. "Emeka, don't do this. Whatever you think this will solve, it won't. You are not this man. You are not a killer." But Emeka's eyes were wild, his mind clouded by months of hurt and betrayal. He took a step toward the stranger, the knife poised to strike. At that moment, a deep, resonant voice broke through the tense silence. "Enough." Both Amma and Emeka froze, their eyes snapping to the stranger who had somehow managed to sit up, his eyes now open and fixed on them. His gaze was clear, steady, and commanding, and for a moment it seemed as if time itself had stopped. Emeka's hand wavered, the knife trembling. The stranger's eyes bore into him, and with a strength that belied his weakened state, he spoke again. "Put down the blade, Emeka. This is not your fight." Emeka stared at him, his breath ragged. Slowly, as if in a trance, he lowered the knife, his shoulders sagging. Amma moved quickly to take the blade from his hand, her touch gentle but firm. "It's over, Emeka," she said softly. "It's over." Emeka looked at her, then at the stranger, and finally back to the ground. Defeated, he turned and left the hut without another word, his steps heavy with the weight of his own actions. Amma turned back to the stranger, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and relief. "You're awake," she whispered, barely daring to believe it. Who are you?" The stranger's lips curved into a faint smile. "I am someone who owes you a great debt," he said. "And perhaps someone who is not so lost after all." With the stranger now awake, the village buzzed with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The emissary from the palace arrived soon after, a tall man with a commanding presence who carried the weight of the kingdom's authority in every step. He was accompanied by several guards and an elderly advisor who seemed to scrutinize every detail around him. Amma, standing beside the stranger, could feel her heart racing. The emissary stepped forward and looked at the man who had been so carefully tended to. "I am here to determine the truth of who you are," he said, his voice stern but not unkind. "Do you know your name?" The stranger nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the emissary's. "I am Obinna, son of Igwe Amaichi." and I was taken against my will on the night before my coronation. A murmur swept through the crowd. The villagers stared, wide-eyed, as the realization dawned. Amma felt her breath catch. The rumors were true. This man, the one she had saved, was indeed the lost prince. The emissary's expression remained controlled, but there was a flicker of relief and recognition in his eyes. "It is you," he said softly, nodding to the guards, who immediately knelt. Amma watched the scene unfold with a strange sense of detachment, as if she were both inside her body and above it, witnessing it all from a distance. She had known in her heart that this man was someone important, someone who mattered, but hearing the confirmation out loud made everything feel suddenly very real. Obinna turned to her, his eyes softening. "You saved my life," he said, his voice filled with a quiet gratitude. "And for that, I owe you more than I can ever repay." Amma shook her head. "I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it felt right, because I believed you were worth saving." The emissary, sensing the depth of the moment, spoke again. "Amma, you have done a great service to this kingdom. You are welcome to come with us to the palace, where you will be honored for your bravery." Amma looked around at the faces of her fellow villagers, at the elders who had once scorned her and now watched with a mixture of awe and fear. She looked at Amika, standing at the back of the crowd, his face unreadable. And finally she looked at Obinna. "I will come," she said, her voice steady. "But I come not for honor or reward. I come to understand what it all means. For him, for me, and for the child I carry." Obinna nodded, a knowing smile touching his lips. "Then let us go together, Amma. There is much yet to uncover." And so, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the village, Amma and Obinna prepared to depart. She felt a strange mix of emotions, fear of the unknown, sadness for what she was leaving behind, but also a deep, abiding hope for what lay ahead. She had chosen a path, and now she would walk it to its end, wherever it might lead. As they began their journey toward the palace, the villagers watched in silence. Some whispered of fate and destiny, others of miracles and madness. But Amma walked forward, her head held high, the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. She had faced her fears, made her choices, and now she was ready for whatever awaited her in the days to come. For in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next exciting chapter.